Hare Krishna, Dandot Pranam Prabhu. I think you're on mute.
I am?
Yeah, it's.
You can hear me now, yeah?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Right. Okay, let's see. We'll just wait a minute before we start.
Krishna, yes, Prabhuji. Dandot Pranam.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Right.
So we might end a little early today. I'm feeling a little under the weather, but let's see how it goes. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Datati Swapadantikam Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Bhavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we are on verse number 9 in the Nectar of Instruction. And so it goes like this. So up until now, we heard in verses 1 through 7 about Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, the following the rules and regulations as a devotee. And then in 8, we heard about Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, when one follows in the footsteps of the great devotees. Now we're going to be hearing about the most exalted part of the scriptures, about Radhakund and about Srimati Radharani and about Vrindavan. So the holy place known as Mathura is spiritually superior to Vaikuntha, the transcendental world, because the Lord appeared there. Superior to Mathura Puri is the transcendental forest of Vrindavan because of Krishna's Rasa Leela pastimes. And superior to the forest of Vrindavan is Govardhan Hill, for it was raised by the divine hand of Sri Krishna and was the site of his various loving pastimes. And above all, the super excellent Sri Radha Kund stands supreme, for it is overflooded with the ambrosial nectarian prema of the Lord of Gokula, Sri Krishna. Where then is that intelligent person who is unwilling to serve this divine Radha Kund, which is situated at the foot of Govardhan Hill? So it's a short purport, and Prabhupada first says that the excuse me, that the spiritual world is 3/4 of the total creation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is the most exalted region. Now, we know that, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the point that it's said like that, the Ekapad Vibhuti, Tripad Vibhuti, 3/4 spiritual world, 1/4 is the material world. Just to give us some idea of the greatness of the spiritual, but actually the spiritual world's unlimited. And the material world is huge, but it's limited, right? Just like it's said that we are in one universe, and the universe is, if you imagine a big bag of mustard seeds, everyone, all of you know how small a mustard seed is. And so that's considered like with this one, our universe is one mustard seed in a whole bag of mustard seeds. But still, the bag of mustard seeds, as huge as it is, or as numerous as the mustard seeds are, is limited. Whereas the spiritual world is completely unlimited. Still, for our understanding, Shastra sometimes says Ekpad Vibhuti, that it's 1/4 of the total creation. And the spiritual world is naturally superior to the material world. We understand that. But Mathura is, and its adjoining areas, although appearing in the material world, is considered superior, excuse me, to the spiritual world because Krishna appeared there. And then the forests of Vrindavan are more superior than Mathura, because that's where Krishna performed so many pastimes. And then Govardhan Hill, Krishna lifted himself like an umbrella and protected the Brijbasis from the torrents of rain that angry Indra sent their way. And it provides a place for Krishna to tend his cows and also to have meetings with his most beloved gopis, and especially Srimati Radharani. And still Radhakund, which is part of Govardhan, we could say, is the highest, because there, as Prabhupada writes, love of Krishna overflows. And there is a nice description of Lord Chaitanya going to finding Radhakund, discovering it. And it was quite a scene because it was just a little, I don't know, puddle. Yeah, it's a very small amount of water. And so some of the Brijbasis were looking at Lord Chaitanya's, it looked so funny that there's this sannyasi taking, this, bath with just this, in this small amount of water. But he found that. And then the Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, Rupa and Raghunath and Sanatana Goswami, they created what we see presently today, Radhakund. And Prabhupada writes that Rupa Goswami has given much stress to Radhakund because Lord Chaitanya desired to find it. So it was very important to Lord Chaitanya. And then Prabhupada writes, the importance of Radhakund, however, cannot be realized even by other Vaishnava Sampradayas because they don't have the understanding of Srimati Radharani that we have. Nor can persons uninterested in the devotional service of Lord Chaitanya understand the spiritual importance and divine nature of Radhakund. Thus, Radhakund is mainly worshipped by the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, followers of Lord Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So if we turn to the 10th canto, chapter 36 of the Bhagavatam, we learn about how Radhakund appeared. So let's read a little bit about that. Sanatana Goswami begins this chapter and says, the demon Arista came to the cowherd village. Appearing in the form of a bull with a large hump, he made the earth tremble as he tore it apart with his hooves. Aristasura bellowed very harshly and pawed the ground. With his tail raised and his eyes glaring, he began to tear up the embankments with the tips of his horns. Every now and then passing a little stool and urine. Clouds hovered about sharp-horned Aristasura's hump, mistaking it for a mountain. And when the cowherd men and ladies caught sight of the demon, they were struck with terror. Indeed, the strident reverberation of his roar so frightened the pregnant cows and women that they lost their fetuses in miscarriage. The domestic animals fled the pasture in fear, O king, and all the inhabitants rushed to Lord Govinda for shelter, crying, Krishna, Krishna. When the Supreme Lord saw the cowherd community distraught and fleeing in fear, he calmed them, saying, do not be afraid. Then he called out to the bull demon as follows. You fool, what do you think you're doing, you wicked rascal, frightening the cowherd community and their animals, where I am here just to punish corrupt miscreants like you? Having spoke these words, Lord Krishna slapped his arms with his palms, further angering Arista with his loud sound. The Lord then casually threw his mighty serpentine arm around the shoulder of a friend and stood facing the demon. Thus provoked, Arista pawed the ground with one of his hooves, and then with the clouds hovering around his upraised tail, furiously charged at, pointing the tips of his horns straight ahead and glaring menacingly at Lord Krishna. From the corner of his bloodshot eyes, Arista rushed toward him at full speed, like a thunderbolt hurled by Indra. The Supreme Lord Krishna seized Aristasura by the horns and threw him back 18 steps, just as an elephant might do when fighting a rival elephant. Thus, repulsed by the Supreme Lord, the bull demon got up and, breathing hard and sweating all over his body, again charged at him in a mindless rage. As Arista attacked, Lord Krishna seized him by the horns and knocked him to the ground with his foot. The Lord then thrashed him as if he were a wet cloth, and finally he yanked out one of the demon's horns and stuck him with it until he lay prostrate. Vomiting blood and profusely excreting stool and urine, kicking his legs and rolling his eyes about, Aristasura thus went painfully to the abode of death. The demigods honored Lord Krishna by scattering flowers upon him. Having thus killed the bull demon Arista, he who is a festival for the gopis' eyes entered the cowherd village with Balaram. So then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives 20 verses that describe the joking conversation between Radha and Krishna after Krishna had killed Arista. So it begins. The innocent young gopi said, "Ah, Krishna, don't touch us now, O killer of a bull. Alas, even though Arista was a terrible demon, still he was a male cow. So you will have to undergo atonement, just as Lord Indra did after killing Vritrasura. But how can you purify yourself without going to the trouble of visiting every single holy place in the three worlds?" Krishna replied, "Why should I have to wander throughout the entire universe? I will at once bring all the countless pilgrimage places here and take my bath in them. Just watch." With this, Lord Mukunda stuck his heel on the ground. Then he said, "This is the water of the Bhogavati river, coming from the Patala region. And now, O holy places, all of you please come here." When the Supreme Lord had spoken these words, all the holy places went there and appeared before him. Krishna then addressed the gopis as follows. "See all the holy places." But the gopis replied, "We don't see them as you describe." Then those best of holy places, joining their palms in supplication, spoke up. "I am the salt ocean. I am the ocean of milk. I am the Amara Digita. I am the river Sona. I am Sindhu. I am Tamraparni. I am the holy place Pushkara. I am the Saraswati. And we are the Godavari, Jamuna, Reva rivers, and the confluence of rivers at Prayag. Just see our waters." After purifying himself by bathing, Lord Hari became quite arrogant and said, "I have produced a pond containing all the various holy places, whereas you gopis must never have executed any religious duties on this earth for the pleasure of Lord Brahma." Then Srimati Radharani addressed her girlfriends as follows. "I must create an even more beautiful pond. So go to work. Having heard these words, the gopis saw that Aristasura's hooves had dug a shallow ditch just west of Sri Krishna's pond. At that nearby spot, all the gopis began digging with lumps of soft mud with their hands, and in this way, a divine pond manifested in the short span of an hour. Krishna was astonished to see the lake they had produced. He said, "Go ahead, O lotus-eyed one, you and your companions should fill that pond with waters from mine." But Radha replied, "No, no, 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 no. This is impossible, since the water of your pond is contaminated by your terrible sin of killing a cow. I will have my countless gopis companions bring the pure water of the Manasa Ganga here in billions of pots, and in this way I will fill this lake with my own water and thus make it renowned unequaled in the entire world." Lord Krishna then gestured to the heavenly personality who was an intimate associate of all the holy places. Suddenly that person rose up out of Krishna's pond and bowed down to the daughter of Sri Vrishabhanu, Srimati Radharani. Then with palms joined and tears pouring from his eyes, he began praying to her in devotion. "O goddess, even Lord Brahma himself, the knower of all scriptures, cannot understand your glories, nor can Lord Shiva or Lakshmi. Only Krishna, the supreme goal of all human endeavor, can understand them. And thus he is eager to personally wash away your perspiration when you are fatigued. He is always anointing your lotus feet with nectarian charu and yavaka and decorating them with ankle bells, and he rejoices and feels most fortunate simply by satisfying the tips of the toes of your lotus feet. On his order, we have immediately come here to live in this most exalted pond, which he created by one stroke of his heel. But only if you now feel satisfied with us and bestow upon us your merciful glance will the tree of our desire bear fruit." Hearing this prayer spoken by the representative of the full assembly of holy places, Sri Radha was pleased and said, "So kindly tell me your desire." They then told her plainly, "Our lives would be successful if we could come to your pond. That is the benediction we desire." Glancing at her beloved from the corner of her eyes, the daughter of Vrishabhanu replied with a smile, "Please come." Her gopi companions all agreed with her decision and became immersed in the ocean of happiness. Indeed, the beauty of all creatures, both mobile and stationary, was enhanced. Thus, gaining the grace of Srimati Radharani, the holy rivers and lakes in Sri Krishna Kund, or Shama Kund, forcibly broke through its boundary walls and swiftly filled Radha Kund with their waters. Lord Hari then said, "My dear Radha, may this pond of yours become even more world-renowned than mine. I will always come here to bathe and enjoy my water pastimes. Indeed, this lake is as dear to me as you are." Radharani replied, "I will come to bathe in your pond as well, even though you may kill hundreds of Arista demons here. In the future, anyone who has intense devotion for this lake, which is on the spot where you chastise Aristasura, and who bathes or resides here, is sure to become very dear to me." That night, Lord Krishna initiated a rasa dance at Radhakund, generating a torrent of the greatest mood of splendorous pleasure. Sri Krishna resembled a cloud, and Srimati Radharani, a brilliant flash of lightning, filled the sky with abundant beauty. In this way, their divine glory permeated the expanse of the three worlds. Shri Radhakund ki jai. Very sweet, huh? Sweet pastime. So any questions or comments on verse number 9?
So, Prabhuji, we hear that the spiritual creation is 3/4. And so, and we read the glories of Mathura, Vrindavan, Radhakund. So, these places should we take in the part of 3/4 or 1/4?
3/4. Yeah, no, they're descended from the spiritual world. So the Dham is very special. It's in the, we can, you can take a train to Vrindavan, right? And and it seems, but it's a special place. And I think we experience it if we go there with some bhakti in our heart. So yeah, it's in the material world, but it's actually filled with the spiritual energy. Although Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that there's a thin layer covering the Dham, so that materialists can't necessarily fully understand it. Although Prabhupada does write that if even a non-devotee comes to Vrindavan, they'll feel some separation from Krishna. So Murari Madhava Prabhu says, please enlighten us regarding Lord's, one of his names is Advaita, meaning absolutely no difference between his form and other paraphernalia. So naturally his Dham also must be Advaita. Why do we categorize some particular place like Radhakund as superior to others? Well, there's the general idea that everything everything spiritual is spiritual. It is Satchit Ananda, right? That's a general understanding. And yet, because we're dealing with persons, there is a hierarchy. Even like we say, perfect, more perfect, and most perfect. So how can something perfect be? How can there be something better than perfect? But that's Krishna for you. So the intensity, and we were going to talk about this in the next verse, the intensity of the love that Srimati Radharani has. Matter of fact, one of the best ways to answer this question, Murari Madhava Prabhu, is to look at verse number 10, because the whole spectrum is given in verse number 10, right from people who perform sinful activities up to Srimati Radharani. So everything in one purport, and also in one verse. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandas Pranam, this is Prem Data Chaitanya Das.
Yes, Prabhu.
Prabhu, that we are generally advised to not take bath in Radha Kund out of our respect to this thing generally. And but here when we see the pastimes, so there Srimati Radharani is saying that whoever will take bath, he will get the benefit. So how do we understand this?
Well, let's go on to the next verse, because the next verse talks about that, right? In the purport. So keep that in mind, Prem Datta Prabhu, and we will get to it. So in the next verse, verse number 10, in the Shastra it is said that of all types of fruitive workers, he who is advanced in knowledge of the higher values of life is favored by the Supreme Lord Hari. So of all karmis, one who has some higher knowledge is better. Out of many such people who are advanced in knowledge, Gyanis, one who is practically liberated by virtue of his knowledge may take to devotional service. He is superior to others. However, one who has actually attained prema, pure love of Krishna, is superior to him. So again, superior, 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 right? The gopis are exalted above all the advanced devotees because they are always totally dependent upon Sri Krishna, the transcendental cowherd boy. Among the gopis, Srimati Radharani is the most dear to Krishna. Her kund is profoundly dear to Lord Krishna as this most beloved of the gopis, who then will not reside at Radhakund and in a spiritual body surcharged with ecstatic devotional feelings. Apakrita bhava. Render loving service to the divine couple Shri Shri Radha Govinda, who perform their astaka lila lila, their eternal eightfold daily pastimes. That means 8 different times of the day. Indeed, those who execute devotional service on the bank of Radhakund are the most fortunate people in the universe. 1 second. So then in 11, so let's just read, because this is answering your Prem Datta Prabhu's question. Of the many objects of favored delight and of all the lovable damsels of Brajabhumi, Srimati Radharani is certainly the most treasured object of Krishna's love. And in every respect, her divine kund is described by great sages as similarly dear to him. Undoubtedly, Radhakund is very rarely attained even by the great devotees. Therefore, it is even more difficult for ordinary devotees to attain. If one simply bathes once within these holy waters, one's pure love of Krishna is fully aroused. And then in the purport, it says, it is stated that a devotee will at once develop pure love of Krishna in the wake of the gopis if he once takes a bath in Radhakund. Srila Rupa Goswami recommends that even if one cannot live permanently on the banks of Radhakund, he should at least take a bath in the lake as many times as possible. This is a most important item in the execution of devotional service. And then later, one should take bath there regularly and give up all material conceptions. So I went ahead in order to read, to address Prem Datta Chaitanya Prabhu's question. So there's a little history to this. At first, Prabhupada allowed the devotees to bathe in Radhakund. And then he saw that they were, they were doing flips and splashing each other and just like as if they were, in a swimming pool in the West someplace at a 5-star hotel or something like that. And then he said, no, he put a stop to it immediately, that, one should be so reverential, so devotional, so fixed. And so he just said better, he didn't want his disciples to commit offenses. So there's different ways to take bath. The idea that is that, like Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he wouldn't take bath because he didn't want his feet to be touching the divine waters. So we know, I think most of us know at least, that when you take three drops on your head, that is considered taking a bath. Some people also bring with them a lota and on the bank do this. But the main point is to be in a very sober and devotional consciousness, whatever one is doing. Because, Prabhupada actually allowed the devotees to play a little bit at Kusum Sarovara. They needed to, do some swimming and like that. But Radhakund, no. So, and I think you all know that, like when you go to Jamuna or to the Ganga, one prostrates, plays obeisances first, and then can, take 3 drops, and that's considered a bath. Does that answer your question, Prem Datta Chaitanya Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay. That's, somebody says they're not able to hear anything, but you can hear me, right? Most of you?
Yes, Prabhu, we can
Yes,
hear.
Prabhu, we are able to hear.
Acha. Okay, so Sugunamai Vasudha Mataji needs to work on something. Her technology. So Murari Madhava Prabhu. So let's address his question by going back to verse number 10. And isn't this an amazing purport? Because, like I said, Srila Prabhupada begins the purport by talking about he's making the distinction between karmis and vikarmis. Now we will study this in Bhagavad Gita in detail in the 4th chapter. But he writes in the, the 2nd or 3rd paragraph, depending on how you count, about halfway through. Those who act on the basis of Vedic knowledge perform sacrifices for the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu and to receive benediction from him. In this way, they are elevated to the higher planetary systems. Such karmis are superior to the vikarmis, for they are faithful to the direction of the Vedas and are certainly dear to Krishna. So the vikarmis are people who just, as Prabhupada says, the vast majority of people in the world today, who just perform activities simply for their own selfish desires, their sense gratification. And above them, in the Vedic yoga ladder, which we'll discuss in great detail, especially in chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita. So above the Vikarmis, or Dvipada Pashu, the two-legged animals, is someone who's a karmi, which means they are following the karma kanda section of the Vedas, the vast things about, you perform this yagna, you give in this charity, and you get, a beautiful wife, or a big house, or, in modern things, a nice car, etc. And that's better than the Vikarmis, because there's some pleasure in following the Vedic direction, even if the Vedic direction is not, the highest part of the Vedas, but because one is still after material desires, but is at least fulfilling them, not just directly through sense gratification, but by pleasing demigods, by performing sacrifices, etc. And Prabhupada goes on that one who acts piously, he can attain a new body amongst the demigods in the higher planetary systems, or he may attain some other position in which he can enjoy a higher standard of material happiness. So that's the karmis. And then on the other hand, those who are engaged in impious activities are degraded and take birth as animals, trees, and plants. That's the vikarmis. So we're talking on a pretty low level here, right? Then later in the purport, Prabhupada says, okay, now above them is a Jnani. A Jnani is considered superior to a karmi because he at least refrains from the blind activities of sense enjoyment. This is the verdict of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, although a Jnani may be liberated from the ignorance of the karmis, unless he comes to the platform of devotional service, he is still to be considered in ignorance. So the Jnani may understand that he's not his body, that the material world is not a place of enjoyment, but he or she doesn't know about Krishna, doesn't know about bhakti, and therefore is still considered ignorant. But then Prabhupada goes on in the next paragraph. When a Jnani takes to devotional service, he rapidly becomes superior to an ordinary Jnani. So that when a Jnani takes to bhakti, that's fantastic. And Prabhupada quotes the famous verse, chapter 7, verse 19 of the Gita after that. And then he goes higher. So he says, okay, but after taking the devotional service under regulated principles, Vaidhi Bhakti, a person may come to the platform of spontaneous love of God, which is Raganuga. So then, and he says great devotees like Narada and Sanaka and Sanatana are in that category. Then he says, of all these devotees, the gopis are superior because they do not know anything other than satisfying Krishna. Nor do the gopis expect any return from Krishna. Indeed, sometimes Krishna put them into extreme suffering by separating himself from them. Nevertheless, they never forgot Krishna. When Krishna left Vrindavan for Mathura, the gopis became most dejected and spent the rest of their lives simply crying in separation from Krishna. This means that in one sense, they were never actually separated from Krishna. There is no difference between thinking of Krishna and associating with Krishna. So even, the gopis are even more, they're the most exalted. There's nothing, they don't care anything for themselves. Even the queens of Dwarka, they want a nice palace and they want Krishna's association and this and that. But the gopis, whatever it takes, they just want Krishna's pleasure exclusively. So they are the greatest of the great devotees. There's no difference between thinking of Krishna, I said this, and associating with him. Rather, Vipralamba Seva, thinking of Krishna in separation, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did, is far better than serving Krishna directly. Thus, of all the devotees who have developed unalloyed devotional love for Krishna, the gopis are most exalted, and out of all these exalted gopis, Srimati Radha Rani is the highest. No one can excel the devotional service of Srimati Radharani. Indeed, even Krishna cannot understand the attitude of Srimati Radharani. therefore he took her position and appeared as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu just to understand her transcendental feelings. So that, in Mukunda, Murari Madhava Prabhu's question, that went through the whole hierarchy. So yes, on the spiritual platform, everything is absolute spiritual, but still there's variety within that absoluteness. And therefore there's things like perfect, more perfect, and most perfect, right? But it's not that the perfect is bad. Not like if somebody goes to Vaikuntha, they think, oh, I got cheated. I didn't go to Vrindavan. Why did I end up in Vaikuntha? Oh my gosh. Right? The devotee has their eternal relationship with Krishna, and that's is revived as Krishna wishes. So other questions or comments?
Prabhu, yes, I have a question on separation. We hear this very famous quote of Srila Prabhupada where he says, the ecstasy of separation from spiritual master is higher ecstasy than even meeting him in person. And of course, many of us, or let's say at least myself, being on such material level or platform, the pain that we experience on separation from somebody whom we like or we revere is very different than you to really feel ecstasy of that separation. And we are here talking about separation from Krishna and how gopis experience that separation, and then Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appearing in that mood of separation. So how do we really comprehend that separation?
It's a very, very exalted emotion. But we do know, one thing I like to do sometimes, I pick up devotees sometimes from the airport. That's we don't have drivers like you do in India where you can get someone to just go and hold up a sign. But I like to do it. And the reason I like to do it is at the international arrivals, I like to just look at the people as they're waiting. Sometimes they haven't seen, because it's not the domestic, it's the international, right? So they have flowers, they have balloons, they have big signs, and they may not have seen this person for 5 years or 10 years, or, and it's very interesting to see the Vipralamba, quotes, while they're waiting, and they're saying, is that the person? Because the doors kind of open up, and the anticipation is there. And then finally the sambhoga happens, the person actually appears, and but I could see how the anticipation in some ways is more intense than when they actually meet the person. So give a little hint of what it's like. Or the example Prabhupada gives also is that a mother may be separate, the child may be off at school or whatever, but the mother sees the little shoes of the child, and then that brings about remembrance of the child. So this is called Udipan. We'll be studying this in the Nectar of Devotion, the different things that remind us and bring out our emotions. So yeah, I guess we can only, in some ways, it's a little theoretical, but that the gopis were more intensely with Krishna in their intense feelings of separation from him. But next time, maybe go to the international arrivals, and you might get some some insight into that. Okay, Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes,
I have a question as well. So if 3/4 of all of creation is the spiritual universe, can we also understand that even in the spiritual universe, all of the souls that reside there are also serving the Lord in separation, or how do we understand that?
No, not necessarily in separation. They're serving the Lord. Separation, Vipralamba Seva, is reserved for the most exalted gopis, basically. Right? It is the it was Lord Chaitanya. If you study in the 4th chapter of the Adi Lila of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it explains the 3 reasons, internal reasons, that Lord Chaitanya why he came. And basically, he saw the gopis and he said, how come they're experiencing so much greater bliss than me? How's that possible? I'm Rasara, I'm the source of all bliss, but their bliss seems millions of times greater than my bliss. So he said, well, I'm going to have to come as a devotee in the mood of the gopis in order to taste what they're tasting. So it's not that everyone in the spiritual world is experiencing Vipralamba Seva. It's something that's very much, generally for the people in Madhurya Ras and those who are specifically following in the footsteps of the gopis of Vrindavan. Is that all right?
So separation here we can understand is always a physical separation that causes this ecstatic love for the Lord to.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I'd have to find a reference. I remember reading something somewhat recently that the gopis may have sometimes felt separation even when they were practically with Krishna, but I don't remember the exact reference. So I don't want to speculate on that. But there's nothing wrong with sambhoga, with actually being with your lover, being with your loved one, right? Matter of fact, you can't really have one without the other. If you never experience sambhoga, then you can't really understand anything about Vipralamba. You can't really experience Vipralamba. So they go hand in hand, and there's nothing wrong with actually being face to face with the Lord. It's just this very, very intense feelings of the highest love that the gopis experience. Okay. Amol says, Krishna taking bath in Radhakund is greatest example where Krishna restates that he is under the control of bhakti. And Radharani taking bath in Krishna Kund is example that devotee consider all Krishna's pastimes as important as Krishna himself. Is this understanding correct? Well, let's see. The first part sounded fine. Krishna taking bath in Radhakund is greatest example of Krishna restates that he is under the control of bhakti. Yes. And Radharani taking bath in Krishna Kund is example that devotee considers all Krishna's pastimes as important as Krishna himself. Well, yes, that Radharani wanted to. Maybe the English might not be perfect there, but that's basically correct. That Radharani, as a devotee of Krishna, is the greatest devotee of Krishna. She wanted to always to have his association, and so she wanted to take bath in Krishna Kund or Shama Kund. Yeah, very good.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes.
So, Prabhu, is it possible to develop this Raganuga Bhakti at all, or is it beyond reach for?
It's totally possible. And one thing we have to remember, Achyuta Prabhu, is that the first, there's these 9 stages, right? Begins with Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, association, Bhajana Kriya, taking initiation, etc. Anartha Nivritti, clearing the heart, Nishta, becoming steady, Ashakti, Ruchi, Ashakti. Is it Ruchi, Ashakti, or Shakti, Ruchi? Ruchi, and then Ashakti, then Bhava, then Prema, right? I heard Lord Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj say that it goes quite quickly after Nishta. So that's inspiring. So I think we've talked about this many times. It's not possible. It's impossible. But Krishna can make the impossible possible. And that's our hope. We on our own, I don't think, if we're honest, probably most of us don't think, oh, I feel so much separation as we wake up in the morning, and we usually feel separation from sleep only, right? But Krishna can do it, and this is where we've come in contact with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's not it's not by accident, and he is the we say that prayer, right? Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gora Trise Namaha, right? When we were offering our food and things like this. So what does that verse say? Namo Mahavadanyaya, the most merciful. Krishna Prema Pradaya, he's coming to give not just like, just chant your rounds, Prabhu. Krishna Prema Pradayate, he's coming to give pure love of Krishna. And he is, Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya. He's Krishna in the form of Krishna Chaitanya. Namne Gora Trise Namaha. And I offer my humble obeisances to that golden form. So that's our hope. That's our hope, not in our own. Otherwise, you're right. It seems like, oh, forget it. I'm lucky I can, get my rounds done without falling asleep sometimes, or something like that. We might think like that, but Krishna can do. And we were talking about Jayapataka Maharaj this morning for his, morning for me, yesterday for you. And there's an example. So we don't have to, look at an example 5,000 years ago and say, oh, it must have been so different in it, the beginning of Kali Yuga. We have devotees who are traversing the earth today. And of course, we have our Srila Prabhupada, and we have Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Bhakti Vinod Thakur, etc. So we're lucky that it's not just theoretical.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, Prabhu, some hope.
Yeah, some hope, yes. Or Prabhupada would say hope against hope. It seems hopeless, but we have so much hope because we have Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Anything
Prabhu,
else?
since we are talking about separation, can I request you to share your views or comments on that verse from Shikshashtakam, Yugaitam Nimishena?
It's way above my head. The one that says, feeling your separation, I'm considering one moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain. I am feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. That one?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes.
This is Lord Chaitanya. Again, almost, Shikshastakam is a little bit like this book that we're studying, right? We began with Vacho Vega, Manasakroda Vega, control your tongue, don't eat too much. And now we're all the way up to Srimati Radharani's feelings of separation for Krishna. So the Shikshastakam begins with the seven different glorifications of the holy name in that first verse, Cheto Dharpana Marjanam, etc. And then it gets very quick, it gets up to the highest, where, Yugayatam Nimeshena Chakshusha Pravishayatam Jayatam Govinda Virahanami. So I don't know how the 12 years became, I don't know why not 13 or 11, but anyway, a moment to be like 12 years or more. It's such a intense longing for Krishna. And we quoted that verse, Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavati Mati, Kriyatam Yena Kutopi Labhyate, Tatra Loyam Apimuyam Ekalam, Jamakoti Surkitayana Labhyate, that the price to pay for Krishna consciousness is loyam, is greed. So the gopis, Srimati Radharani, and Lord Chaitanya and his Shikshastakam were showing the highest level of greed, that there is so much want to be with Krishna that they think a moment's separation is like 12 years or more. Or the gopis cursing Lord Brahma for giving us eyelids. Sometimes for a split second we blink and then they can't see Krishna. So, you know, that's a little different than us. The alarm goes off and we're like, okay, let me go back to sleep. we love the eyelids. And the gopis hated the eyelids. So total difference. Although I, you know, you are all exalted souls. You're getting up at 5, you're here at 5:30 in the morning to hear these classes. So I'm very indebted to you and very impressed with your determination there's 54 of you on the call today. That's very impressive. So in verse 11, we talked about bathing in Radhakund. Well, it's, and Prabhupada just writes, why is Radhakund so exalted? The lake is so exalted because it belongs to Srimati Radharani, who is the most beloved object of Sri Krishna. Krishna's love for Radhakund and Srimati Radharani is the same in all respects. So, and Prabhupada specifically wanted that picture of Radhakund on the back cover of the Nectar of Instruction. And Srila Prabhupada met his Guru Maharaj at Radhakund. And that's where he said, if, you know, there's trouble in the mutt, and if the people are fighting over whose room, who gets what room, and he said, if you ever get money, don't build, you know, print books. If you ever get money, print books. So, yes. Here's a few other things Prabhupada said about bathing, just to satisfy Prem Datta Prabhu. Devotees, because sometimes what happened in Prabhupada's presence, and it's still happening today, especially it seems to be devotees from Russia, is they leave ISKCON and they go to Radhakund. Not so many, few. And it happened also in Prabhupada's time. So Prabhupada was not happy with it. And so Achyutananda Swami is saying, Prabhupada, they also wear Radhakund tilak. There is no harm, Prabhupada told him, but they should understand what is Radhakund and how to deal with Radhakund. Raghunath Das Goswami showed how to live at Radhakund. Sankhya Purvaka Namagana Nativi. He was circumambulating Radhakund, falling down, making a mark. That is Radhakund Basi. Sankhya Purvaka Nama Gana Nativi. Not only counting holy names, but offering obeisances so many hundreds times. That is Radhakund. So much vairagya he showed. He can take bath in the Radhakund. First of all, do this like Raghunath Das Goswami. And then a little later, the narrative goes, as he left the roof, Prabhupada cautioned us once more about Radhakund. He said we should not take bath in Radhakund, but we should simply touch the water to our heads. He said that unless one is very respectful to the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani, they cannot take bath there. It is only for very advanced souls. Then another, Radhakund and Radharani are non-different. How can you enjoy Radhakund by swimming? You cannot touch with your feet, even Radhakund. You can take little water and keep it on head. That is respectful to Radhakund. Of course, things are going on like that, but strictly speaking, Radhakund should be respected as Radharani herself. That is Radhakund consciousness, highest Radhakund consciousness. So, you know, you might see some senior devotees who do take bath in Radhakund, but they focus their mind in a very, very devotional way. But still sprinkling the water or taking a lota and taking a bath like that is a very wonderful alternative. So, any other questions or comments?
So, Hare Krishna Prabhu, one more question, Prabhuji, about Vipralamba Seva. So, so Prabhuji, We see, we as a devotee, our goal is, to be honest, Sambhoga Seva. We just somehow wants, maybe at the end of this life or in future, wants to go and go back to Golok Vrindavan. So,
Good idea.
at least that is a goal, Prabhuji. So, but do we need to at least think about Vipalamba, or try to artificially emulate that bhava, to so that when we go we get higher elevated position than this thing, or it is not required, just knowing
Well,
about it is good?
we should understand. I really like the way Tamal Krishna Maharaj once explained this to me. He said that if you serve Lord Chaitanya in Dasya Ras, he will enlighten you in Madhurya Ras with Krishna. So if we serve Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission, giving the holy name to other people, in one way or other, whatever we can do. We've talked about that before. We may not all shave our heads, put on saffron cloths, and do that. But if we serve Lord Chaitanya's mission somehow or other, he will give us the understanding to understand Radha and Krishna. So, and I think we talked about this last week when we were talking about spontaneous bhakti, that yes, there is this Raganuga, where you're following the footsteps of a resident of Vrindavan. On a more simple level, we want to at least start developing the spontaneity that we want. The alarm goes off when we want to get up and chant our rounds. We can't wait to go to the arti and see the deities. We can't wait to take prasadam with our friends at the temple. We are eager to spread Krishna consciousness, to do a program or distribute books or whatever it is. So that's a spontaneity that we can be working on very much at our level. Like Bhakti Vinod Thakur writes, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, when I hear the mridanga and kartals, my heart wants to race towards the kirtan. Right. So that level of spontaneity will be very, very helpful for us at the platform that we're on right now, and strictly in following the instructions of the spiritual master. But strictly, that's an important word, strictly. Prabhupada used it. And also we could say devotionally, following the instructions of the spiritual master. I'm doing this out of love for my spiritual master, following his instructions. Not just like, yes, sir, but yes, sir. Is that okay?
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah. All right, now we will be beginning Nectar of Devotion next week. Is that right, Achyuta Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu.
You're okay with that? I'm your servant, so you tell me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Prabhu. I think.
All right. So what I want you to do then is to read the preface and the introduction to the Nectar of Devotion. Okay, just the preface and the introduction. They're both very short. Okay, that's the homework reading for next week. Now there may be two homeworks in that but I think the homework assignments that we give you are quite easy. So I think you'll be okay. This is not IIT.
Slightly above IIT, Prabhu.
Excuse me? It's
Slightly
above
above
IIT.
IIT.
In some ways, it's above IIT. Yeah, yes, it's way above. It's in another planet. Yes. Okay, so I'll stop a little early today. I'm not feeling so well. And we will continue next week by Krishna's mercy. I hope you all had a very wonderful, for those of you who are, I assume most of you are disciples of His Holiness Jayapataka Maharaj, I hope you had a very wonderful Vyasa Puja celebration. And I'm very grateful to Varda Krishna Prabhu for inviting me to say a few words in glorification of Maharaj. That was a wonderful opportunity that I had yesterday for you, this morning for me.
Thank you for making the time, Prabhu. Really.
Okay, so Prabhu's Vancha Kalpa Turubhyascha,
Kripasya
Kripasinubhyevacha,
Kripasindhubhyevacha,
Patitanam
Patitanam
Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah.
Hare
So we
Krishna,
finished.
Hare
We finished one of the books. Congratulations! It may be the smallest one, but still, we did it. We did it. Now
Proof
you're
in
all
the exam.
lovers. Now you all love Krishna. Hare Krishna. See you next week.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Please take care of your health. Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Premdatta Prabhu, any further
Thank you,
information?
Prabhuji.
Any further information on
No, actually, I don't know, because I don't know. We were planning that we'll take at least a week break and prepare for exam, but now Prabhu is saying, so I had no words to interrupt in between, saying when Prabhu wants to start immediately. So maybe we need to, because is Shankpani Prabhu on the line? Okay, I'll get in touch with him, because now